Of Regnery Publishing. We are, as many of you know, the oldest and leading publisher of conservative political books in the country. Chances are, if you have a book in your home, on your bookshelf, in your library, you have a Regnery book. And we've been publishing great conservative books for 70 years. Thank you. I've been honored and privileged to be the president of the company for the past 15 years. And that's enough about me. Down at the end, we've got Mona Sharon, as you know, a syndicated columnist, a best-selling author, best-selling Regnery author, may I add, senior fellow at the Ethics and Public Policy Center. She was a regular for many years on CNN's Capital Gang and Capital Gang Sunday, and she currently co-hosts with Jay Nordinger, the weekly podcast Need to Know. She also has a new book coming. As a publisher, I know it's important to mention this. She has a new book coming called Sex Matters, coming out this June. So welcome, Mona. Thank you for joining us. Next to Mona, we've got Kelsey Harkness. Kelsey is a senior producer at the Heritage Foundation's Daily Signal. She's also co-host of the weekly podcast Problematic Women. I love that title. She's also the 2017-18 Tony Blankley Fellow at the Steamboat Institute. She's a contributor to The Federalist and an editor at Bright, which is a daily email for women by women. Welcome, Kelsey.
Thank you.
And to my immediate left, I've got Ashley McGuire. Ashley writes and speaks widely about religion, feminism, politics. She is the author of another Regnery book, Sex Scandal, The Drive to Abolish Male and Female. And Ashley's writing has appeared in the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post, Time, USA Today, many other places. She lives in Washington, D.C. with her husband and 3 children. Welcome, Ashley.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, we've got a lot to cover, so we're going to get right to it. You know, as the publisher of Regnery, I have worked with many high-profile conservative women, including Ann Coulter, Sarah Palin, Michelle Malkin, Laura Ingraham, Katie Pavlich, Second Lady Karen Pence, of course Mona, and Ashley. And there's a question I like to ask them. As a board member of the Clare Boothe Blues Policy Institute, I actually am able to speak to hundreds of young conservative women from colleges across the country. And there's a question they ask me. And as the mother of 3 daughters, all in their 20s, there's a question that I would like to help them answer. So here's the question I'm going to ask it of each of our panelists. Do you consider yourself a feminist?
So this issue gets young women so confused. They've been told that to be a feminist is to be pro-woman and to want what is best for women. And if you define it that way, I think we would all say, yes, we are feminists. But unfortunately, over the last 50 years, the actual feminist movement that has been at work in American society has been quite different. It has had an agenda that, alas, has embraced an attack on the family, androgyny, the belief that there are no innate differences between men and women, and that this has to be orthodoxy, it has to be taught, and it's wrong, you will get in trouble if you deny it. And finally, abortion. So that triumvirate has turned off a lot of women, like me and like many others. And so when we're asked, are you a feminist? I would say, I'm pro-woman, but not that kind of feminist.
There we go. Kelsey, how do you answer that?
What I think is so great about this question is that on the conservative side, there is room to agree to disagree. As we go down the line here, you're going to get different answers. You probably all have different answers out there. If you are a woman on the left, there's only one way to be a feminist. And I think it's great that we're able to have diversity of thought on our side, whether or not you're a feminist. So to answer your question, I don't reject the term feminism, and I do consider myself a feminist because I think that there's so much important work that I am forever indebted to from the first wave feminist be, Anthony, that if I wholly reject the term feminism, I'm doing women like her an injustice. So I am a feminist, but you're not going to see me walking around with "this is what a feminist look like" t-shirt, because I agree the term has been incredibly hijacked by groups like Planned Parenthood, and we need to take that back.
So I want to be a feminist, but I don't know what that means anymore. And I think that's a part of why when you poll people, you see something like 1 in 5 Americans identifies with that label. But those same Americans would all agree that, women, there shouldn't be discrimination against women. And I think a big part of the problem has been Hollywood. You look at someone like Emily Ratajkowski, who appeared in a music video for a song that was considered to be about rape, and then went on the cover of Cosmopolitan magazine and said, "I can sleep with who I want, wear what I want, and still call myself a feminist." It confuses people. So I very much agree with my fellow panelists that I think it's time to reclaim that phrase, reclaim the word. I think this is the project for the next generation of women, is to take it back. And I really, there's been multiple waves of feminism. I think it's time for another one.
Totally agree. So how do we retake it and how do we define it? What would you say if you wanted to call yourself a feminist? How would you define that? What would you say?
Well, I think feminism, to succeed, to move into the next wave, has to do 2 things. The first is to unhook itself from the hookup culture, because nothing has been worse for women, I think, than the hookup culture and abortion. And that's really the second thing, I think, is and I don't know exactly how to do this, but I do think women on the right are trying really hard to release the women's empowerment movement from the grip of the abortion lobby. When you look at the March for Women, the fact that pro-life women were told, "Sorry, you're not welcome here," I mean, that really sums up where things stand.
I agree with you. I think that's an incredibly difficult question, and part of the reason why we're here today talking about this issue. I think for the last year, the Women's March has defined what feminism is, which makes it all the more difficult for us to take it back now when you have millions of women on the streets fighting for this idea of feminism, when if you go and actually attend these marches and talk to these women and ask them what policies they really support, I find that very few of them actually agree with the policies that the Women's March actually promotes on their website. So a lot of these quote-unquote feminists today, I would argue, aren't maybe as extreme as we think they are when you look at their leadership, but it requires a communication on our behalf. I think we need better communications as conservative women to connect with young women, to show you that we are pro-woman, we can be feminists, and a different type of feminist exists to include you.
I totally agree. I think when I talk to a lot of young women, they're looking for another definition. They're looking for a group to belong to, and they're looking for other women that agree with them. And I think, especially young women, they don't want to be perceived as anti-woman, and there's nowhere else for them to go, because the sort of radical feminists have elbowed out all the other points of view.
So the subtitle of my book is titled Sex Matters, and the subtitle is How Modern Feminism Has Lost Touch with Science, Love, and Common Sense. So one of the ways that thank you, available on Amazon for pre-order. One of the ways that we have to repair feminism and make it more relevant to young women is to get off this idea that we have to deny the science, that we have to say, no, there are no differences, everything is socially constructed, there are no innate differences between us. So and I talk about that at length in the book, the evidence is it's not even controversial. But the other thing is that the feminist movement really went wrong when it said that anything that was the male model was the thing that women had to be.
Right.
And instead of saying, no, the female model is a great model, and most women prefer to have different priorities in their lives than men do, and that's fine. Not only is it fine, our whole society desperately needs it. And so we have to ratify women's choices when they say, you know, I'm going to cut back at work. I'm going to take care of my kids more. And we have to push back against the Sheryl Sandberg message, which is, don't do that. That's, she wrote a bestseller called Lean In. As somebody who leaned out to raise 3 sons over the period of about 25 years, I am so glad I did. I have no regrets, and other women in my position feel the same way.
Next question for you ladies. When you think of the feminist movement today, what really makes your blood boil? Let's start with Kelsey.
All right, so there's a lot that makes my blood boil. There's a lot to this question. I think some of the easier and more obvious answers are how hypocritical they often are. Their support for abortion, which is actually killing women in the womb. But I'll tell you personally what really gets to me is groups like the Women's March, which again I do believe is what is defining feminism today, is their exclusion of women internationally. So this includes the Me Too movement. So their version of feminism is often very selfish. It's often about me. Don't get me wrong, Me Too is very important. I'm important, you're important. But the reason I love the name of this panel so much, Us Too, is because it's about all of us. It's about an inclusive version of feminism where I'm not just worrying about myself as a woman here in the United States. I'm worried about the women across the seas who are facing issues like female genital mutilation. And those women are never talked about. Not only do they face practices like FGM, then they are often forced into an arranged marriage where on their wedding night, the man that they're being forced to marry believes it's his right to get sexual pleasure by ripping her open after she's faced FGM. And I'm sorry to be graphic, but I think we need to be talking about these issues more. So every time I see the Women's March, whose tagline is women's rights are human rights and human rights are women's rights, it makes my blood boil when I see them being silent on the women in Iran who are risking arrest, risking their lives on the street to take off their jobs. They've been silent time and time again. Anytime women in the Middle East or African countries are making progress fighting for their rights, they have such a platform and they don't use it for those women because they're only thinking about themselves.
What makes your blood boil?
I think I would say it's the fact that in today's society, to be considered an empowered woman, it's that you have to be a card-carrying supporter of Planned Parenthood, or you are somehow a disappointment to women. That's what gets my blood boiling, because nothing has been worse for women than abortion. No entity, no company has done more to profit off of women's suffering and to lie to women and to deceive women than Planned Parenthood.
What gets you riled up?
So I agree with everything my fellow panelists have said. And I could say that the misuse of data, like the so-called 77 cents on the dollar figure, which is a statistic that's impossible to kill, even though it's false. But I'm actually going to twist this around a bit and say that I'm disappointed in people on our side for being hypocrites about sexual harassers and abusers of women who are in our party, who are sitting in the White House, who brag about their extramarital affairs, who brag about mistreating women. And because he happens to have an R after his name, we look the other way, we don't complain. This is a party that was ready to endorse, the Republican Party endorsed Roy Moore for the Senate in the state of Alabama, even though he was a credibly accused child molester, you cannot claim that you stand for women and put up with that.
Well, you know, this is a really interesting point because there's been this, and there are many, but there's been this explosion of sexual harassment scandals, and in many cases, accusation has been equal to conviction, right? Many people get accused, and that's all anyone needs. And I think for our panel, one of the really important questions is what has caused this sudden sort of explosion of all of these scandals, and has it been good for women, actually, right?
So whenever I talk about issues like this, I always say if you want to see where we're going, look at college campuses. They're about